So at this point in time, if Michael Long is available from Renaissance Fiber, there's been a lot of talk about fiber. Can we do it here in the mountains? Can we grow it? And does it make financial sense?
Well, those are good questions, Janine. Thanks for having us. We're always happy to speak at the extension meetings. We interacted with you guys way back in 2017. You guys hosted some of the first meetings and did some of the first work on hemp growing in North Carolina, and we're glad to see that you're still doing it. I myself started out in fiber to begin with in 2017. I did a little bit of CBD work, but our focus has been on fiber outright since the first season. We formed the company Renaissance Fiber as a fiber producer, and what we mean by fiber producer is that we don't deal in herd or things like that. We receive raw fiber and then we convert it into various forms. The most specific form that the general form of fiber we produce is just a degummed material that has been prepared for sale into the textile industry for producing yarns. We're getting a lot of interest from non-woven producers, paper makers, things like that. Those are all markets that are available to fiber producers and fiber processors. It's not a straightforward thing to do. I don't think there's anything easy in any of these businesses or any of these efforts people are making, from the growers all the way down the supply chain. But I think it is a much simpler animal to deal with early on in the supply chain for a lot of reasons that I'll try to highlight. So I'm going to just go through a couple of things. I'm going to try to share my screen. I am a Zoom newbie. Janine didn't believe that in the beginning, but I am myself a Zoom newbie. I'm going to try to share screen here and see if we can actually do this. So let's make sure. All right, so
All right, you've done it.
All right. So when we were first contacted by Janine, we were asked, she wanted to know whether we being Western North Carolina has the acreage, the equipment and climate to actually profitably grow fiber, because you don't have the large farms, you don't have the thousands of acres that they have in Eastern North Carolina or even over in Eastern Tennessee or south of you guys, and whether or not there's a niche market for small scale hemp growers. I think I don't know if I can answer these questions with absolute specificity, but what I would like to do is just give you a sense of what it takes to make fiber profitable, to actually move it down a market to begin with, and then give you some numbers that sort of help, and then try to paint some scenarios where something like this might actually make sense for growers. So for starters, let's talk about the supply chain. Obviously, you need to grow the stuff, and I mean that's the task that I think most of you are concerned with trying to sort out. You can get a wide range of seeds, and we've seen a lot of success in growing in different parts of the state, different parts on the East Coast. We've also seen a lot of failure. There's a lot of uncertainty, and there's a lot of things to iron out. We are confident, though, that the institutions in the state, and particularly North Carolina State and the Ag Extension, are going to help make sure that these problems get ironed out sooner than later. There's a lot of effort right now to identify seed varieties and start to build in the experimental apparatus to determine what the seeds produce, where they grow best, and what sort of materials comes out of them. The grower will grow, and then they'll bale it up and they'll sell it to a stalk processor. To my understanding, and this is the way I know that Renaissance Fiber only gets fiber from sativa varieties, and it's my understanding that I don't know of any stalk processors that will process. For example, the leftover stalks from CBD, we get a lot of questions about that. The fiber just doesn't come out very good from that. It's more like a seatbelt material coming off of the plant rather than a nice fiber. But a stalk processor will take the stalk and they'll break it into the various pieces. And you probably all heard that hemp can provide material for a wide range of products just from the stalk itself. Of course, you get the fiber, you get the lignocellulosic material from the hurd, which is a sort of a corky material. And then you can also get all sorts of different, versions of that, which you might, that you might combine in just a general biomass product, which has a lot of uses on its own. I'll talk about some of them. And then downstream from the processor, there's multiple users. I mean, there's people that will just take and bag hurd, for example, and use it for animal bedding or soil amendments, use it in compost as a base for compost, biomass for those sorts of things. There's also a lot of interest in its use for construction materials. I'm sure people have heard about concrete. There's composite wood makers, one in Tennessee. And then, of course, there's simply the lignocellulosic biomass that you can use to extract chemicals. You can get raw cellulose out of it, and you can get the binders, which we refer to as gum, which make an excellent base for a wide range of chemicals. So the opportunity from hurd itself is enormous. Fiber processors like ourselves take the raw fiber and convert it in forms that would be wanted, for example, by yarn producers, as we've already said. There's a large push and a lot of anticipation in the production of hemp for yarns and in the production of consumer textiles because of its value as a natural fiber and the ease and simplicity with which it is feasible to generate this natural fiber relative to cotton production or wool production or the synthetic fibers like the cellulosic, like Tencel or rayon or even polyester. Of course, our founding documents of this country were written on hemp paper. Our original money was hemp paper. So we know that there's a market for that. We get interest for that. We get quite a bit of interest in trying to find out if there's use for that. And then also, fiber itself is a good binder for composites. So it can be used in construction materials or making, I think somebody mentioned in the chat, something about BMW wanting to use materials for making panels in their vehicles. These are all things that downstream suppliers are looking to get hemp for. So with this is just a basic outline of the supply chain. I want to give us a quick sense of the state. So the growers, we've had some successes. I know that my first crop in 2017 in Yadkin County, we used an Italian seed variety, and it shot up fast, even though we planted late, and we got a reasonably good crop out of the gate. Since then, we've seen people that have done a great job and had good crops. We've seen people that had no expectation of their crop coming up, and all of a sudden they're dealing with 2 tons an acre of material on their plots. We've also seen a lot of plants come up and then go 2 feet and seed out and turn yellow and die. It's never obvious why this happens. It's going to take a lot of experimentation and seed access and testing to get these things ironed out. But we have to expect that that's going to continue to happen because we know the demand is there. In contrast to the CBD industry, the market is ready and waiting for this stuff. Stalk processors are coming online regionally, and we anticipate that we'll actually start to have like local North Carolina or regional material available by the summer, late spring, early summer 2021. We know that there's some folks down in the central part of the state in the Siler City and the Rockingham area that are processing fiber, though I think they are also contracting their own farmers out of there. Then there's us, the fiber users. We're ready to go. We can process a lot of material right now. We just can't get it. So again, that's something that's in the exact opposite of the CBD industry. But it has to be done in a certain way. You can't give us fiber that has a lot of material and other material in it because it has to get cleaned out. It reduces the yields. It takes time. It costs money and all of those things. So we have to have some sort of expectation of consistency and quality for the fiber that we get. I will point you at the end to our webpage. We provide information on how to identify the specs and to produce fiber that we can take. Hurd users, there's small, big, national, international buyers that are awaiting sources for hempcrete, for composites. We know people that are buying this for animal bedding. There's specific markets in the animal bedding industry that this is being aimed at. Horses, chicken houses, things like that. But this is also, it's also a complex problem because you need clean material and it has to be made to spec. So it's not simply the case that you can grind up stalk and, sort of do a moderate job of pointing the different pieces in different directions. You have to take some time to build an apparatus that will distill out the pieces to produce what you need to spec for your buyers, of course. And then, of course, there's other end uses. Biomass energy is one we've heard about, soil amendments, biochar productive. And I have to say, we know outright that, the United States is built on creative minds. And of all the places I've been in the world, this is the one where creativity drives things is more effectively than anywhere else. So we actually look forward to seeing what sort of things can come out of the hemp industry. To talk about the growers specifically, in terms of Western North Carolina, I can really only contrast to what's happened in the East and in the Piedmont. So, for example, 2 years ago, we had a crop that went in the ground with the same seed that went into the ground up on the Virginia Plateau in Southwest Virginia. and every bit of it that went into the ground in North Carolina died or went yellow and grew stunted. It actually had physiologically changed leaf shapes and things like that. Whereas 40 miles north on the Virginia Plateau, they were getting 8, 10, 12 foot fiber crops, the same materials, same batches and everything. And what we determined is that down in the Piedmont and in eastern North Carolina, you really get climate extremes that will shock a seed that's not ready to deal with those sorts of things. So if we were to project that into western North Carolina, well, first of all, the topography helps if you can get the soil, if you can get water drained off of the soil. If you ask eastern North Carolina growers what the biggest problem in growing hemp has been for them, it has been the fact that it has flooded at least once every growing season. And as it's already been stated, hemp is not happy with water. So if you're in a region where you can get a heavy rain and it's going to run off quickly, then you can probably grow a pretty good crop without that risk. Similarly, you get issues with heat extremes. We had in 2018 a heat wave in May, right when the plants were starting to grow up and they're most sensitive, and it absolutely stunted everything. This happened in the Piedmont. This happened all the way down in the southeastern part of the state, down towards Wilmington. The heat just scorched everything, and that obviously is not going to happen in the higher elevations. What we do know is that while we didn't have luck with certain types of seed in the Piedmont and eastern North Carolina, that hemp has an enormous ability to adapt to different climates. And this is obvious when you look at where and how much hemp has grown in specifically Europe, where you can get varieties that grow well in the northern European regions like the Ukraine and up in there. And you also get very good varieties that grow in southern France and Italy and Spain. We're confident that people will start to identify seeds that will grow in climates that where they operate. And again, that's simply a matter of ironing out the uncertainty through experimentation and through good understanding of what's coming in your way. Regardless of, aside from the fact that you have smaller plots of land and probably have a little bit more difficulty getting large crops grown, you're still in good proximity to a lot of local and regional markets. You're down, northern Georgia, South Carolina, Tennessee, even parts of Virginia, and of course into North Carolina, the textile industry, the pulp and paper industry, and the composites industries are all very well entrenched. And it's really not much more than a logistics problem to try to get material that you grow into those markets. And lastly, this is sort of a hypothesis, but I imagine that the isolated plots will be good for the production of seed to prevent cross-pollination and things like that. Right now, there's not any seed production going on in the state or in the region that I know of. There might be some in Kentucky. And what we do know is that the Kentucky varieties do like to grow good. They grow well in the Piedmont and the foothills, and we have to imagine there will be some success in western North Carolina. The disadvantages, of course, is that you have smaller operations. You'll have to sort of collaborate together to meet larger orders. The logistics of getting some of the stuff in and out of those hills I know you guys live in might be a problem. And with the microclimates, as Janine has noted, it might be a problem of consistency. But then again, this is also couched in the uncertainty. It might be possible that there's a variety that will grow well in a wide range of climates and produce a consistent product that will be easily and readily sold into markets. Restate the unknowns. You got to know what seed you're going to use. What market you're going to aim for. You can grow a sativa variety that doesn't produce a very good fiber, and you can still get the herd sold. What are the yields? We've seen records of up to 10 tons per acre. We don't know how that is going to play out in places like western North Carolina, but we have to imagine that it's possible. And Janine, I wouldn't mind afterwards if you'd comment on what experience you guys had with your fiber trials up there. In the path to the local regional economies of scale, the stories matter, specifically in consumer goods. This is because in the data era, it is possible to trace material from seed all the way to the shelf, and companies like to build stories around that, and that allows them to target specific markets and reach specific retail outlets that would otherwise just be lost in the commodity. But otherwise, it's still possible, I believe, to focus on basic and accessible products from the production of hemp. So that doesn't rule anybody out. The equipment, Janine, you suggested that Eastern North Carolina might have an advantage because of the field size and the equipment. We simply recommend basic stuff. If you can grow hay, you can grow hemp for fiber. We call it basically ultra hay because it's just giant grass. You use a seed drill to plant it, you use a sickle mower to mow it, you dry it, and then you bale it, and then you sell it. So if you can do that, if you can grow hay and you can grow hemp, then you can do it up there. Um, some basic costs. This is our experience. $4 a pound for seed is probably the upper end of what our growers are willing to pay. You might be more like $3.50 to $3. Certainly going to come down with time. So 50 pounds an acre, $200 an acre. Fertilizer is anywhere from $70 to $75 to $100 an acre based on experience with our growers. I just put $90 an acre so that the $10 of diesel that goes into this rounds up to an even $300 per acre cost. So far, we have seen crops that produce 1 to 2 tons per acre, which is theoretically low because there's in places like North Dakota, New York State, Pennsylvania, there's published values that state up to 10 tons of acre is possible with varieties that are readily available now. We just have yet to see that. If it happens and anybody has any stories about that, we'd love to know. We'd love to find you guys because it would be great to start achieving these high yields. The prices I quote prices here that come from a company called the Jacobson, and they track costs of the prices and the costs of the various hemp markets at the moment, or cannabis markets at large. 15 cents a pound is probably a little low. If you could get a really good crop with a really high quality material, it wouldn't be hard to push up to 20 cents a pound. But if you add all these up and just going by maxima and minima, you can go for anywhere from losing $180 an acre to at a 5-ton yield, 15 cents a pound, really good crop. That's $1,200 an acre net revenue, which, the numbers say this. We don't know if experience says this or not. It's still very early. And of course, it counts in just as much in the uncertainty. And I put the simple example that if you get 2 tons per acre, like things that we've seen down in the foothills, at 10 cents a pound, you net $100. I don't know what people net for growing wheat or soybeans or things like that. I think this is approximately in that range. To provide a simple example of how a small grower, though, can get involved in a niche market. This is a very generic example, but I point to LL Bean or J. Crew, companies like that. In fact, I'll use J. Crew as another example. J. Crew sells exclusively in North America linen fabric from just one mill in Ireland, and that's a case study in a niche market. But the way that mill is able to market their fiber and market their material allows them to drive a pretty large amount of sales. So if we just take the example of a typical, let's say an LL Bean shirt production line, it might take something in the order of 20,000 pounds of total fiber to produce. Right now, blends are what people are mainly focusing on in yarn production, and we'll say 30% hemp blend is a nice target, which equates to about 6,000 pounds of processed hemp fiber. This isn't raw hemp fiber. Raw hemp fiber weighs more than processed hemp fiber. But if you backed that out, it's equivalent to only 10 to 15 acres of hemp at a decent yield. So this is, I think I estimated 2 tons per acre, 2 to 3 tons per acre is what bounds this range. That says right off the bat that it doesn't take a large farm to produce material that can find its ways into an actual market and find itself in catalogs and be sold. The textile industry is absolutely story driven, and it's built on relationships that allow them to build stories that they can go back to regularly and repetitively over time, like with Baird McNutts that produce the fabrics that they produce. Right now, stories of land stewardship and the ability to source materials domestically they absolutely drives up the amount that buyers are willing to pay for this material. For example, I just wrote a quick story that if somebody in Western North Carolina has been working with a variety of seed that is known to produce a good fiber and it's consistently produced, and they've done the job of documenting their soil conditions, maybe gotten some certifications. They keep good track of all the records they can, so to allow for traceability. The processors and they make sure that it moves through processors that are themselves domestic and that are themselves transparent. You can easily multiply the value of the fiber you produce by 2 times or even more. And a simple example of that although it's also more, it's based on cost, is that organic cotton sells for 3 to 4 times as much as normal cotton does or upland cotton does. What this does not say, though, is that is whether or not there are additional costs involved in things like organic production of hemp. I don't know that. Maybe somebody can comment on that. But these are exactly the types of ways that niche markets can be supported. There's also organizations like FiberShed that are promoting regional fiber and textile production. And I know that they have a foothold in Western North Carolina. We've just been interacting with them recently. They operate small mills, or they excuse me, they don't operate, but they find associations with small mills and small producers to produce really high quality apparel and fabrics and home goods and things like that the hemp market is absolutely poised to be involved in. And the closer you are to the producers, the better in those cases. Stalk processors, a basic processing facility as we understand it, and we've worked hard to try to understand processing facilities, can process on the order of 1,000 to 3,000 acres per year with a 2 to 5 person crew manning 1 to 2 shifts. So this is a basic set of machines. It doesn't have a large footprint, only requires about 5,000 square foot of space for machinery plus space for storage. 1,000 to 3,000 acres isn't a lot. I don't even think it's a lot for some of the counties in Western North Carolina. I think somebody can probably quote statistics. I think there's 50,000 acres in Buncombe County alone, although I think most of it is done for livestock. I don't know anybody up there that grows grains or anything like that, but if a cooperative model came together and was able to install one of these 1 to 3,000 acre per year systems, it would not be hard to build your own hemp fiber shed and involve yourself in the local markets. Or if you get consistency or start to build stories, you could become the Baird McNutt of Western North Carolina for hemp. This is all the type of, it requires business savvy and those sorts of things to do that. But I will emphasize that if you're going to try to operate a processing facility, you have to be able to sell all of your products. Herd is 2/3 to 3/4 of the plant mass that you're going to produce. You can't throw all of that away. Fiber yields, you can reduce you can get good fiber, you can get bad fiber. You have to be able to get rid of it in any case, whether it be simply for soil amendments or if you're selling it to make jeans for Wrangler, for example. In the smaller processing facilities, they can probably handle variability in quality because they will be working with smaller buyers. Although you can aggregate processing facilities to get, to integrate and interact with larger buyers. The large scale facilities, we don't know any of the big ones that are coming around here. Sunstrand intended to do that, but Sunstrand no longer exists. But they will be focusing on, meeting demands of big business. And one large processor that is in your area can easily, meet the demands, meet the production from Western North Carolina, Eastern Tennessee, Georgia, Northwest South Carolina, and probably even Southwest Virginia. Of course, your ability to participate in that will be limited by logistics, and surely the large processing facilities won't be able to handle a lot of variability and consistency because they'll be meeting large demand orders. So just some final thoughts and a quick summary. The uncertainties we hope will be overcome eventually because ultimately hemp for fiber is not that complex to grow. We don't call it ultra hay just to sound cute. It is, you plant the seed, make sure everything is prepped right and hope for good weather. And then when it's ready to go, you cut it, dry it, and bale it. Hemp varieties, it's more likely than not that varieties will become available that will work in Western North Carolina climates. Of course, due to the climate extremes that have plagued Eastern North Carolina, we anticipate some success in Western North Carolina in ways that has not been seen in other places. The proximity to the buyer is a critical component, but like I said, a lot of the industry exists already in your region and your interstate facilities are good. I know people can move stuff around pretty well, so it shouldn't be hard to get it into those industries if necessary or as it comes available. Eventually, the seed costs are going to drop. The yields will increase as we get this figured out, but also, people foresee hemp becoming a commodity, which means prices themselves will drop unless you are able to build a story in niche markets and that sustain the values, which is itself possible, just like with any material that's grown or any crop that's grown. Ultimately, though, there's always going to be a need for basic plant biomass. If you look at crops like soy and corn produces starches and sugars. Soy produces oils and proteins. Hemp will produce cellulose and lignic biomass. There's always going to be a need for this. Regional and local markets can develop. You can sell, you can produce herd and sell it in bags at your local Tractor Supply with your own brand on it right out of the gate. It's not a lot of overhead to get that done. And lastly, I just wanted to drop this in there because people think about it, people talk about it, we haven't seen it, but it is possible to double crop. And if you can get a grain crop out, whether it's for seed production for selling to growers the following year, or if you're pressing it for oil or whatever, it's possible. But what we'll say is that if you go that far, the stalk itself will have started to degrade and you'll lose a little bit of the value in the fiber, but it probably, if you work it right, that you could underpin your crop and actually end up with a better outcome. I wanted to add this because people often ask, hemp fiber, hemp stalk gets retted, and retted comes from the Dutch word for rot, and it literally means that you rot the stalk. Whether you put it in water to let it rot or you leave it in the field to let it rot, it starts the breakdown process, and it makes things easier in certain ways because it makes it easier to separate fiber from the herd and helps render the fiber better. But it can also damage the fiber and kill its yields. As well, if you're in a situation where you get a lot of mildew and mold, you can ruin the fiber outright. So people ask about retting. We say that we ask them not to because we know outright that it preserves the fiber quality. That being said, we have seen some good rets. We don't know how it's done. And in a microclimate situation, we imagine that somebody is going to do some retting experiments that will work in a specific microclimate. And when that happens, it will be a brilliant opportunity to create a story. And if you do that and produce good fiber, come find us. We'll help you make it happen. I think that's all I have. Here's our contact information. We've been interacting and we're ourselves and trying to develop processing facilities because we ourselves are material limited. So if you have any interest in trying to get something like this up and running, let us know and we'll try to get you information. Let me know if there's any questions. Now it's time for me to figure out how to get out of screen share. And how do I get out of screen share? Stop share. Ha! Janine, you're muted.
There we go. Great job for the Zoom newbie. I am impressed.
The computer's smoking.
Really good job. Lots of really good information. Yeah. So the big take home for me was that we can do this here. And there's market opportunities for our creative Western North Carolina growers, but people need to realize we're talking more like hundreds of dollars per acre for fiber instead of the $1,000 per acre net returns that we're talking for CBD. Which, right, Michael?
Yeah, that's yep. Correct. I mean, it's about yields, obviously, and if you can get a Carmagnola, which unfortunately they were selling for 16 cents a pound for the seed 2 years ago, if you can get some of the varieties that are known to produce really, really high yields, there's no reason why you can't get several $100s an acre. Mm-hmm. But like I said, there's a lot of groundwork that needs to be done, no pun intended.
Katie, what kind of questions do we have come in?
We had a few really good ones. So Drew Kit would like to know which genetics have performed well for you.
Well, we aren't growers. We can say that, like, for example, we know that what grew and didn't grow, the stuff that grew on the Virginia Plateau was an H51 variety. It's called H51. It's a Ukrainian variety. It's actually, the H stands for something that I can't pronounce. That grew well on the Virginia Plateau. They got 8 to 10 foot stands. It did not grow well down in the Piedmont, and it was tried for 2 years. The Italian varieties have all grown well, at least down in the Piedmont. The first year we grew Futura and Felina, and they both came out wonderful. And that's in fact how we got our leg up in fibers, because we were able to get access to biomass early for our experimentation. Daniel might actually have comments on some other seed varieties. I didn't introduce Daniel Johannes. Daniel Johannes is on here. He's my business partner, but he's on the other side of the state, so he's in his own Zoom room at this point. Daniel, do you have any comments about genetic sources?
No, I just underscore your comments about the Italian varieties. The Carmagnola variety is one that we know firsthand that produces a really nice fiber. The H51 will produce a good fiber as well. We like it in particular because a large percentage of the stalk is fiber. So it's supposed to be some 30 or 31, 30 to 35% of the plant stalk, the stem is fiber. So yeah, there's some, I mean, the data is out there. You can, it's really more a matter of what will grow here. There's one called the MS77 that's out of Australia that is supposed to be, it's supposed to be
mind-blowing.
like
Crop you
15,
see, yeah.
15 feet tall. And it grows well in Kentucky. I imagine that'll have a lot of fiber. So that's another, MS77 is another one.
So
The-
Carmagnola did really great for us in Waynesville for a couple years. It's also one that went hot on us. So that was kind of a surprise.
Well, we'll add that we recommend, unless you're going to double crop, we recommend harvesting before the flowers even start to come out, because the plant, it will grow its fiber until it's time to grow flowers. And at that point, it forgets the fiber and the fiber starts to degrade. So the highest quality fiber is before the flowers come out. So
Okay,
you don't
good
even have to
point.
worry about the hot.
Because those were beautiful plants, without a doubt.
Indeed, the fiber comes out beautiful as well.
Any other questions there, Katie?
Yeah, Margaret Bloomquist asked, and Daniel touched on this, he responded in the chat, but I'm just wondering if you have any contributing opinions. Approximately what is the minimum amount of fiber needed for processing?
So yeah, what I answered, Michael, was that we process at a ton at a time.
Yep.
But that doesn't mean that if you've grown 1,000 pounds of and I guess it would be about 5,000 pounds of stock that the stock is about returns about 20% of the weight as fiber. So
if you produce 1,000 pounds, we'll take it.
Yeah.
But if you want to produce material that's going to be sold as a unit, and it's going to be sold to our producers because it's going to go into like a pair of socks, or some socks that are going to be sold specifically as Western North Carolina farmers hemp socks, we would need at a minimum 2,000 pounds.
Yeah, and read up on some of the things that Daniel's put in the chat about telling your story and the regenerative agriculture, and how we could sell this region for real high value small acreage type. I think there's an opportunity there.
Yeah, it is.
And just back to that H51, it probably should grow well in the mountain regions of North Carolina.
Okay.
I would expect, given its performance in southwestern Virginia.
Sounds good. All right. Well, thank you very much. Really great talk, and we appreciate it. I'm sure you're going to get more questions moving forward.